at Wuhan University in China. A student gave me his old copy with Chinese language notes in the margin. I don't read Chinese, so those notes simply showed me how hard the reader worked to study and comprehend the writings of Lao Tzu. But I was drawn to Lao Tzu's poems because they paralleled the way I experienced Christian spirituality. He emphasizes kindness and peacemaking, and this speaks to my Quaker identity and faith experience. Lao Tzu lived and wrote in China from 640 to 531 BC. Lao Tzu expressed his care for the world by focusing his writing on how to live one's life, how to love, and how to lead. His work taught that good leaders respect common people and lead through inspiration and not violence. The word Tao refers to the way or path. Te is power, and Ching, the Tao Te Ching, Ching is translated instrument. So the Tao Te Ching teaches how to be an instrument guided by the power of the right way. Lao Tzu speaks of being under heaven or of being in harmony with heaven's way. This power is spiritual in nature. One must be open to the Spirit, moving and breathing in concert with it. In the Quaker tradition of the way, we stay in touch with the Holy Spirit and move in submission to that inner light. The voice of Christ who speaks to my condition. I have been a leader and educator in the Friends Quaker Church, and I've practiced what Quakers call communion, waiting in worship for the Holy Spirit to speak in us and through us. Discernment is subjective at best, as is any leading of the heart. But when one truly seeks wisdom to guide action, there is benefit. So we'll just pause a little bit and ponder that a bit. Okay, next, this explains, as part of the introduction, explains my approach to the Tao Te Ching. I spent time studying several translations of the Tao Te Ching. I studied each one of the 81 wisdom poems, or analects, might call them, reading them over and over, and I tried to understand what each poem was saying, then what each of them meant, what each of the poems meant to me. Only then would I begin to write. After each draft, I shared with my poetry group, the Striped Water Poets of Auburn and Washington, and they offered feedback, questions, and suggestions for strength and clarity. The Tao Te Ching seems to fall into three distinct categories: how to live, how to love, and how to lead. And I found that the 81 poems can be separated equally into 27 each, into the three subject areas. Poems are listed in sequence and by number in the Tao Te Ching, so the numbering will not be sequential in my rendering, since I have just organized them by subject and not in order. Now, I invite you to peruse, ponder, and discover from this ancient source filtered through my Western mind and my Christian Quaker heart. And I challenge you, keep your mind and heart open as you read or listen and reflect. And we'll pause again.
So, Jim, let's just check in, because I'm not sure everyone knows what the Tao Te Ching is.
Oh.
And yeah, go ahead.
It's a philosophy of life, basically. And Lao Tzu, he was before Buddha. before Christ. And here's this person who somehow discovered a spiritual nature. Uh, uh, yeah, that's basically what my understanding anyway. And somehow he got in touch with that spirit of life. And I'm assuming God. I
Yeah.
can't prove that, but
And that's what I loved in your work with that was this integration of a Quaker understanding of our spirituality, and then looking at the Tao Te Ching through that lens helps us connect with it. But I think you're right. That's what is it, about 300 BC, 400 BC that this was written, and
yeah, yeah, 640.
640, yeah, and it was consolidated even before Buddhism came into China.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's a source text for Zen Buddhism.
yeah, and then and what just struck me was how it was paralleled my experience as a Quaker. Just
Uh,
amazing.
yes, oh, that's what I love in what you've done here. Okay, thanks.
All right, ready to go? Okay, I'm gonna read a little portion of the introduction to the segment on how to live. And seeking worldly goods and selfish ends leads us nowhere. Still, we strive. We strive for success. We strive for satisfaction. We strive for peace. Letting go can free us to grow and prosper into the peace we seek. Trying to be good, striving that we might obtain a heavenly reward, is useless since we are already blessed by the Creator. In the accepting God's blessing, then we find life's blessing for others and blessed life for ourselves. Lao Tzu draws our attention to the created world and shows us how to live. We are surrounded by wonder and danger, both beauty and devastation. With God's help, we will learn to be like nature, to be who we are created to be. I think I'll just stop at that point and then I'll share the poem.
So when Jim and I talked about this, we thought with 20 or so people in the room, it would be hard to hear from everyone. But as you take a moment to think about what Jim just shared, I'd like to invite you to type into the chat any response you have, a brief response. It could be just a few words, but what that is bringing up for you. So we have a chance to see how people are responding to what he's sharing with us. And with that in mind, Jim, maybe you could read that poem once more.
Oh, that wasn't a poem. Okay, and now here's the poem.
Ah,
I'm going to read three poems, and this is the first one. So I'll read it and just pause again a little bit.
perfect.
He says, this is how to live. The spirit lives on, mother of us all, creator, she is unknowable, flowing without end within us. Woo.
So with that poem in mind, go ahead and respond. I know what jumped out to me was the unknowable is within us. And just add yours to the chat.
Okay, poem number 2. When the cup is full, stop pouring. When the knife is sharp, stop grinding. A house full of silver and gold will not make you more secure. Self-satisfaction in money signals impropriety. To know when to stop is a spirit-born gift. Mm.
I love that, Daniel. Not don't run ahead of your guide.
And here's the third poem, And How to Live. The spokes of a wheel add strength, but the hole in the hub completes it. A clay pot is lovely to look at, but the emptiness within makes it useful. Walls, floor, and ceiling form a room, but the space inside is where we live. The material offers some comfort, but spirit brings true fulfillment. Mhm. Mm. Very good.
So let's pause for a moment, Jim, just to capture. So these were three poems from what you've categorized as how to live, right?
How to live. Yeah.
Yeah. And for you, what were if you were to take three takeaways from this, what would your three core takeaways be?
Oh, no, it has to be a question. Well, I think those comments were just right on that
Mm.
idea of you can't get filled up if you're already full.
Hmm.
So having that emptiness and willingness to open your heart, I think that's what that's saying, I think.
Absolutely. And isn't that like the quieting your own voice until you can hear the spirit in
And open worship is a good example of
right?
that. And there so many religions are just filled with words, blah 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 blah. Blah,
Yeah,
that silence, that's what really grabbed me about Quakerism.
absolutely. Me too. And it's sinking into that experience, but doing it collectively. There's something powerful in that part of it.
Yeah. Now, do
Um,
you want to know how to love?
I do. I do.
Okay, let me get a drink of water. This is a portion of the introduction to the How to Love. We learn that listening is loving, not by asserting our own way, but by opening our hearts to the inner light in order to learn what it means to live with compassion and creativity. As a psychotherapist, I learned that to be effective, I must empathize, genuinely share myself, and show warmth in a non-possessive way. In fact, these qualities prove necessary above and beyond my formal training to ensure a patient's healing. I find these same qualities expressed in Lao Tzu's poem from thousands of years ago. The poems in this section help us to move toward loving more effectively. I'll just one more little part. Finally, we learned that we reap what we sow. Sowing love, for example, results in joy, kindness, hope, and peace. When we live self-centered or rule-based lives, however, we turn toward warring and wanting more, whereas gratitude raises us towards heaven's door. Here's the first poem in, I'll read, in How to Love. Life breathes, sorry, life breathes is ever changing. When we get stuck in our prejudices, we miss truth and beauty. Best to empty yourself, seek silence and balance. Our world serves up both wonder and danger. The spirit-filled one judges not, offers love to both saints and sinners alike.
Feel free to go ahead and respond in the chat. For me, that one element of the spirit-filled one judges not really speaks to me.
Love your chats. Mm. That speaks of loving your enemy. Here's the second poem in How to Love. The spirit of love is everlasting. The universe expands endlessly because both are not self-seeking but exist to nurture. The spirit-led one has complete fulfillment through her loving service. Mm, that Lao Tzu was something else. Okay, here's the third poem, How to Love. Be water. A stream flows forth, refreshing all. It doesn't struggle, doesn't judge. Make our world livable and welcoming. Be aware, generous and honest, fair and diligent, blameless as a baby. And here's a portion of the introduction to How to Lead. Lao Tzu knew how terrible leaders can be, controlling, violent, self-aggrandizing. But true leadership inspires rather than controls, empowers rather than berates, and serves instead of demanding servitude. Again, the secret in seeking guidance from the inner light. This is the gift within all of us, partly the result of having been made by God in God's image, partly the result of the Spirit living and active within us. Leaders try to control others by making and enforcing rules. Would-be followers are prone to resentment and subversion. That's because trying to control others often results in resistance and loss of control. Instead of controlling, a good leader empowers by example and by trusting their people to solve the problems they've been given. Humility is a key virtue for leaders. A good leader listens, whereas a fool can't stop talking. Good leaders encourage others to find their way forward and appreciate it when they do. Okay, here's the first poem in How to Lead. When a leader is humble, the people are more trustworthy. When a leader is controlling, the people are anxious and contentious. Without a sense of justice, even good folk become deceitful, start a downward spiral. A spirit-led leader walks upright, not prideful, demonstrates, doesn't lecture, inspires forthrightness by example. She seeks the inner light and finds her own, or finds her own. I like the way Lao Tzu throws in both genders in his analects and poems.
Yeah. Jim, would you mind reading that one again?
Yeah. When a leader is humble, the people are more trustworthy. When a leader is controlling, the people are anxious and contentious. Without a sense of justice, even good folk become deceitful, start a downward spiral. A spirit-led leader walks upright, not prideful, demonstrates, doesn't lecture, inspires forthrightness by example. She seeks the inner light and finds her own. And that's really interesting, that last line, because I think it means her own light.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of caught me off a little bit there.
So feel free, if you have a response to that one, to type it into the chat. There's so much in that particular poem.
Yeah.
Each one of these is like a little gem.
It kind of gives you a thought about some of the leaders in our world. I don't want to name them. Hmm. Mm, mm. Here's the second one about how to lead. To be a leader who blesses our world, don't seek power and control. Instead, listen and respond. Let selflessness be your guide. Then you are ready for authority. You will be a strong mother to our land, offering depth of knowing, spiritual wisdom, long lasting worth. Again, I just love he puts in the female strong women. Mm. Mm.
Jim, do you want to respond to that question from Carol? Or
Say that again.
Carol's asking, is it typical of Taoism to see spirit as both male and female?
It's Lao Tzu, he was something else because back then, males dominated things. Um, and there was really some terrible things going on in China. I don't know, I'm not an expert on that, but um, terrible leaders and people suffering and so forth. But that idea of him connecting with the spirit of knowing, it's astounding. I mean, where do you see that? You don't see it very much in writings, spiritual
Mhm.
writings.
Yeah.
And then here's the third poem.
Mhm.
Want to know how to lead a great nation? It's like frying small fish carefully, gently. Don't overdo it. Lead by spirit. Evil is kept at bay or its effect mitigated. The spirit led leader heals, doesn't harm, and virtue blossoms. Like frying small fish.
So we've had a chance to hear three poems from each of the themes of how to live, how to love, how to lead. We've had a few responses from the group, and we have plenty of time now to enter into more of a shared discussion, questions. Feel free to unmute and ask a question or make a comment directly, or you can put it in the chat and I'll highlight it for us. But let's enter into more of an open discussion now. Does that work for you, Jim?
I missed your last phrase.
That we just move into more of
Yeah.
open discussion and question
Yeah.
and answer?
Okay.
Okay. So I'll just start by saying I really appreciate, Jim, the way you hold to the original meaning, but you use Quaker language to give us access to this. I mean, 2,500-year-old Chinese mystical text. It's amazing that 21st century Americans have access to it. So I just want to start by my appreciation for your work here. It's a lot of work that you've done that is both intellectual, but it's the poetic piece of it that I really
Yeah,
value, that you've captured in such beautiful language. So thank you.
yeah. So I didn't translate, I just read translations. And that's what yeah.
So how many different translations are there, and are they like very different? Do they sometimes conflict, or are they all basically similar?
I used I mainly used three of them, and I can't tell you which ones they were, but there are many, many, many translations. Yeah, so if you looked up Tao Te Ching and spelled it right, uh, um, you'd see, like at Amazon or something like that, you'd see lots and lots of them.
Is there one you would recommend for someone who hasn't read it before, other than your own translation, but one that you think is maybe the best, the one that was most inspiring for you?
I'm sorry, I got those books all went away. This was written in 2018.
Well, Carol, I
And
can share.
there's
This
one.
is a copy of the Tao Te Ching by the San Francisco poet Stephen Mitchell.
Oh,
It was my first encounter. It's a 1988.
it's a translation.
Yeah, but he is also a poet, and he brings a sort of a Buddhist perspective to the language in the way that you bring a Quaker perspective. But it's quite a good one. I wanted to mention, because I did a little research, that at Reedwood we had an earlier member do a translation.
Oh,
We had a member named Charles Wu. I never met him, but he was a professor of Chinese linguistics at Reed College, which is across the street from our meeting.
oh my
And
gosh.
so I tracked down this one, and his title is "Thus Spoke Lao Tzu," but
Oh.
it's a very academic reading, and it's rough going. I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, I did know, I remember him from way back. Yes, yes. He,
Oh,
he was quite a brilliant intellectual. It's just I did not know he did a translation of the Tao Te Ching, though. So
well,
that's,
and there's one other Pacific Northwest person, Ursula K. Le Guin, and she did a translation also. But
hmm.
she writes about having encountered like this late 1800s version of the Tao Te Ching that her dad had in a library, and that it followed her um, to a point where she felt inspired to do not a translation, I don't imagine, but a an interpretation. So
Wow.
those are
Wow.
our Pacific Northwest
Oh,
authors.
wow. Good to know.
So there you go.
So I have another question. I'm always full more questions than answers. So, um, could you tell me more about Lao Tzu? What type of person was he? Considered like a prophet? Was he a spiritual leader at the time? Does he have any parallels to like Jesus or?
That's a good question. I'm old and I forgot a lot of this stuff. So, uh, but I would just generally speaking, he was like he was like a philosopher, I guess you might call it. Um, and I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing he did listen to the spirit. That he um, that's just in a little bit of my memory of that. Um, that's where that came from. Um, but actually, you know, how he lived, I can't. Yeah.
So would you say he was a mystic?
What's that?
Would you say he was a mystic?
Yeah, I
Was
guess that would be another
he a
thing to say. Yeah.
mystical philosopher or
Yeah,
something?
there you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wish.
He was alive during a period of warring states in China. It was a very unstable period,
Yeah.
which is why so much of his writing is around leadership and effective leadership. But there's a lot of argument about whether he existed at all, whether he's a combination of a number of writers. Some of the earliest texts they've found are reversed, like the last half of the book happens first. Uh, so yeah, there's a lot of mystery to, so not just a mystic, but a mystery.
Yeah.
Uh, if he lived from 640 to 531, how old would he be? Hmm, 531, almost 90 or something.
Yeah.
So he must have lived a good life. I mean, that's unusual for back in those days.
So would that be like the time of Moses? How would that compare to Israelite history?
Oh, that's another good question I can't answer.
Moses, I
Yeah,
always
no, I think you're right. I think you're right, Carol. Yeah.
They
Hmm.
got them.
Hmm.
Roughly around the time of the Old Testament. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, Sean knows
There's a
stuff.
lot of, there was a period in which Confucianism and Taoism were in tension with one another as the two main philosophies. So there was tension even then. He wasn't on his own. And the Confucians, of course, were much more in favor of the hierarchical top-down society and following the rules, and the the Taoists were like, no.
Hmm.
So I shared a translation that I especially appreciated, and it's free. You can just click on the link and pull that in if you want that particular translation. Um, it seemed to me that, especially in the first of the 81 poems, that Lao Tzu was laying out for us what is the human challenge.
Hmm.
Um, that we have, that we're all born into an experiencing reality. Excuse me, I have a 15-month-old here in the house, and we've got Apple and a few others, but and it's amazing how much he understands, though he doesn't speak other than wow. I say, gee, I like your new boots, and he looks down at his feet and wiggles them around and understands what the word boots is, but doesn't say it. So Lao Tzu talks about that it is through desire that we get the 10,000 things, our world of things. And without desire, we're back into being into the Garden of Eden, where everything is connected, where everything is of a piece. And it's the acquisition of language and naming things that fractures this whole into pieces. Um, and so that our challenge is always trying to get back into the unity and repair the fractured reality that we have, including ourselves. That I think that I'm separate from you, um, maybe on Zoom, but in a room, we're both breathing the same air and sharing each other as we speak and breathe, and we are connected. And so this whole thing, for me, religion is all about getting us back into our connected sense. And the ministry of Jesus was getting us back into our connected sense. The lawyer saying, how do I get eternal life? Jesus says, love God and love your neighbor. Because love breaks the fractured reality and brings back the unity that we all need and want. I love the story of the Old Testament of Jesus telling of the prodigal son. The older son does his duty, and duty is defined by language of what you need to do and what you don't need to do and how to do it best. And the younger son wants to follow his intuition and go out and have a great time. And it just lays out this challenge that we all have of, do we do our duty or do we follow our intuition and our wants and feelings? And do we observe the guardrails? I mean, the Catholic Church was wonderful defining the guardrails, the 7 deadly sins of crossing the guardrails. And Jesus ends that story with saying, well, he became hungry. And maybe we become hungry too, as how we get back into the unity, into the connectedness. Anyway, I found Lao Tzu is amazing, and Jim, your translation was just marvelous, and on a whole bunch of them, just hit them right on, and I appreciate him very much. Thank you
Thanks.
for your work.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Doug. And I want to bring in what Carolyn wrote because I thought it's interesting. She says, I've come to recognize that active listening without inferring my take can bring a holy depth to a chat over coffee. Spirit in our midst. It's a little bit of a poem all by itself. Thank you, Carol. I also wanted to share, because you brought up a point, Doug, about words, that we're in dangerous territory, Jim, by talking about the Tao Te Ching, because the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching are, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name, which reminds me of God. You know, I am that I am. That's, don't try to name me. So that language piece you're bringing in, Doug, is an interesting one, that we're trying to use language to get back to a time before language, or before categorizing. Sorry, Jim, I jumped right in there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Doug was sharing. Other questions or comments for Jim or about the Tao Te Ching?
Yeah, I was interested in the fact that Tao means the way. And of course, that made me immediately think of the fact that Christianity was initially called the way. So I'm just wondering if there was any connection, if there was any, connection between early Christianity and Taoism, even though, one's in China, one's in the Middle East. Might there have been any interaction between those two
Yeah, I
religions?
don't think I can answer that question either.
That's probably not an answerable question. Probably no one knows, but it just struck me that Christianity was called the way before it was called, Christianity.
There certainly has been a lot of speculation about where Jesus was from the time he was 12 and met the elders in the temple and started his ministry when he was 30. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking too about Paul. He went into the desert, Arabia or somewhere. I mean, we don't know how far he went. What did he learn when he was in the desert? I think that there could have been some interactions between the two. That's just, I mean, I like to think so, but maybe not.
It's an interesting thought,
Like Jim, I think you were talking though in your introduction about that he found spirit, right? That the same spirit that George Fox encountered is perhaps what Lao Tzu encountered.
Yeah, there's so much connection between the all the I would say the New Testament and then of course the whole thing about Quakerism and the spices and all that, just it's just there. It's there. Um, yeah, but I don't know whether there was any connection or there was the same came from the same source,
Mm.
perhaps. But I'm also not sure about a lot of things.
There is
Josh,
the reality. There is a reality that we all share. That I mean, I'm just blown away that Lao Tzu comes and talks about the problem with language and just experiencing and not thinking, but experiencing reality. And then we have in our Christianity the Garden of Eden and going in and getting knowledge from the tree, the fruit of the tree of knowledge, um, given to us by Satan. Um, um, that that it has a price. Knowledge has a price. Fracturing reality has a price, and getting
mm,
back in is so difficult. And in fact, in our Jewish tradition, the implication is that we can't get back in the garden.
Mm.
There are cherubim and flaming swords blocking the way, but Jesus comes along and says, "No, no, no, you can get back in.
mm,
Get back in."
mm.
And that's what George Fox taught too, that we could basically go back to the garden.
I love the point you're capturing, Doug, that it's language and categorizations and sophistication and knowledge that actually divide us from that,
Mm.
and that we have to be able to do both. Jaja, I wanted to just come back. You had this wonderful comment you made earlier: walk humbly with the Spirit and it will show. Others will feel safe to walk humbly with you. Together great progress can be. You're responding to some of the leadership talk, and it resonated for me because I saw your talk about be curious, not judgmental, from the TV show that I'm forgetting the name of. But
Ted Lasso.
do you see connections there between Ted Lasso and this?
I do. I do. I think that, well, I had a boss who used to say, and I'm sure it's a saying, you get more, you can make more friends with honey than vinegar. And I think if you're leading people, sure, you can lead with a rod, but people are going to resent you. They're not going to be happy working with you. You're not going to get their best work. So, and as Christians, that's not who we're called to be anyways, to lead like that. Jesus was loving. We're called to be loving with everybody. So if we're in a leadership position, we should still continue to be loving and work together. And then it's so much easier. And it's a nice environment too. I mean, and the Ted Lasso, yes, absolutely. I mean, if you know the show at all, it was a little hostile when he first came there to work, but he quickly won them over by being humble and reaching out to them and building them up. And I think as leaders, that's what we're called to do. We're called to look at the people that we're placed together with and see their potential and how we can help them rise, because by them rising, we all rise. We can all do better. When someone's doing better and we work together, we all do better.
Thanks, Jaja. Thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Smith, you also wrote, you said service can begin to feel like a must or a dull routine. I loved that. But reminding myself it should come from humility and love refreshes the tasks. Could you say a little more about that, Doug?
I'll pretend I'm a politician for a minute. I'll answer a different question. How's that? I think I've been drawn to Taoism different points in my life because of the simplicity, and I know that is what brought me to Quakerism, and also years ago, my wife and I went through a 2-year Bible study. We really went deeply into the Bible, both Old and New Testaments. And this side of all that, as I'm getting older, the only portion of the Bible that I really feel speaks to me is the Sermon on the Mount. And it's it's the words, or as close to what we think the words of Christ might have been. And there's a simplicity there as well. So that for me is kind of a commonality that I've found attractive.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah. Patricia, I just have to say this because I'm so curious. Are you standing out in the woods while you're listening to this, or is that a background? Patricia in Missoula. It looks like Missoula. Other questions or comments? Curiosities?
Luke has a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Jim Luke asks, have you explored any other faith practices or traditions through the lens of Quakerism?
Let me ponder that. Let's see. Okay. You know, well, when of course, as I was growing up into my young, I started going to different churches and see what, trying to find the answer or whatever. But it was mainly in the Christian format. I did go like Unitarian. Those are kind of so things like that. Just a little bit here and a little bit there, but no, mainly it was the Tao Te Ching and Quakerism in my life, my older life, or my.
I wonder if anyone else wants to respond to Jim's question. I think it's such a, or to Luke's question rather, that it's an interesting one, exploring other faith practices and seeing them through the lens of Quakerism. I know for me, I found the silence in Quakerism, the collective silence, to be a really special thing that connected to my earlier experiences with meditation. So I'm kind of thinking of that as an example, Luke, of a practice, something that you do again and again. And I immediately felt at home when I discovered a Quaker meeting. So there was that overlap there.
I've explored some of Sufism, and I find that there's a lot in Sufism, the mystic, which is the mystical part of Islam, that's similar, has parallels to Christian mysticism, because I've explored a lot of kind of the mystical parts of other religions, and Sufism seems the closest. So that's why I was curious about whether or not Lao Tzu was an actual mystic, because I haven't actually explored Taoism that much, but now I'm very curious to read the Tao Te Ching and explore it. So thank you so much, Jim, for bringing it to my attention.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad I could share it, and thank Sean for putting it all together. Yeah. So.
Well, I'll throw in a few more thank yous. Because I ran across your book, Jim, at Sierra Cascades yearly meeting at the Barclay Press table.
Yeah.
And I was astounded before I even started reading it, that here was this Quaker take on Taoism. And then I read it and was just delighted. So I was so happy that you agreed to come and speak with us and share your work in person. So thank you.
Glad to do it.
On the readwood.org website, where there's a write-up of this, there is a link to the Barclay Press, so you can buy a copy if you want one. Yep, Doug's got his. I've got mine. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. It's lovely to see new faces and to connect around Quakerism and contemplation. So thank you all for joining. Yes.
Blessings.
And kudos for Berkeley Press for publishing it and doing some interstate work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everyone from all over the place. I'm so impressed with our range of locations here.
Right.
Be well. Take care.
Follow the spirit.